Oh, I think we live. I think we
It
live.
is.
Oh, sugar, sugar. Here we
It's
go.
working. Yes.
So I so rarely live stream, so this is gonna be deeply entertaining. But let's get a cracking.
Yes. I look forward to the ride. Let's get
Let's get
it.
it. All right. So thank you for all the people who are joining us live, all the people who will join us not live. Thank you for being here, and thank you for joining us in these series of frank conversations about motherhood with Cecile Edwards of MommyEvolve. MommyEvolve empowers and assists pregnant and postpartum mothers in practicing holistic self-care, intergenerational understanding, healing, and growth. A small now, taste of Cecile's offerings include group coaching to become a more mindful, conscious parent, personalized wellness coaching for perinatal and postpartum moms, a mommy wellness circle, and guidance on how to read and interpret ancestral messages for healing and transformation, which is so important these days because we all have our ancestors beside us and we need to understand what they're saying to us.
Mhm.
Cecile is also a maternal equity consultant for organizations and companies seeking to incorporate or offer holistic maternal care. If you want to learn more about Cecile, you can find her at mommyevolve.com. Or if you on Instagram, you one of those people over on Instagram, you can find her at Mommy Evolve on Instagram. And you can also schedule some time to connect with Cecile at Linktree /evolving self, which I will put in the show notes so you can get into it. So for today's talk, we're going to talk about what the patriarchy is and how we as mothers can choose not to advance it, right? Because these little dudes aren't raising themselves out here in the well, maybe they are, and that's the problem. But I don't think all of them are raising them themselves.
Mhm.
So you
Yeah.
ready?
I think I was born ready.
Ooh, that's what I'm talking
Was
about.
I born ready? Yeah. Yeah, no, that's thank you for that introduction and thank you for reaching out and don't mind me fidgeting with my earring. For reaching out and, us being able to conceive this and just put it into action. I think it's the power of working um collaboratively, which I feel like that's something that is critical to our sort of healing ourselves from the patriarchy too. But we'll get into that later.
Yes, yes.
Um, so yeah, I'm happy to be here and to just be able to have this conversation to learn more from others, right? Because I learn a lot too from people interacting and asking questions and sharing their stories. That is also very powerful. So
All right. So, do you want to get the ball rolling by just talking about what exactly is the patriarchy? Because it's a buzzword nowadays, but I don't think there's a lot of
mm,
definition about what exactly is it.
yeah, I mean, it took me back to I went to Douglas College, which was at the time it was the women's college of Rutgers University, and anybody that knows New Jersey, Rutgers is like the huge university in New Brunswick, and a lot of people didn't even know that Douglas was a women's college. Anyway, when we started, when I started school there, every um, person who enters has to take this class, and it's basically a class that teaches you about patriarchy and hegemony and suppression and all of those things
Ooh, that's what I'm
that
talking
lay the
about.
foundation. Yeah, that lays a foundation for what I feel like the founders of the college wanted women to be able to think outside of the box, I guess you could say, of what we had
Yes.
been raised in. And so it was also always the difficult class, right? Because it was a new concept for a lot of us to step into and to now have to navigate thinking about. But anyway, that's what this question reminded me of when I was first looking at it. But in general, it's a system of government. Like if you go to the dictionary, it'll tell you that it's a system of society or government where the father or the eldest male is the head of the family. And the descent of the family is traced through the male line. Okay. So, when we're talking about systems, then the systems then are ruled by what they say the side of the brain that men rule, function with, the left side.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's one where logic, where building things, but building things not in relation to the natural cycles oftentimes, where the cycles that we function off of is based on a male internal cycle. So we function basically,
Yeah.
a woman's cycle is monthly, but we function on a 24-hour cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you wake up this time, you do this time, this is how it's supposed to be, like that, in a 24-hour period. But we know that women, we function based on the cycles of the moon, and we are highly affected by it. I think that men are also affected by it, to be quite honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Quite frankly, all of us are affected by each other's cycles, but we have been sort of groomed to function by the cycle of the male body and mind, right? So
Right.
basically, in short, that's what patriarchy is. And matriarchy, oftentimes people will say, oh, well, do people want to be run by a matriarchy? And they assume that it's the opposite, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where women, you're ruled by women. However, history tells us that actually it has always been more balanced, where women recognize, or societies recognize, that we all have these special, unique gifts, and we have to share power, and we have to share resources and things like that. And at some point in history, somebody decided that
Right.
we wanted to have these absolute power mindsets, and ruling with brute force and control. And that is, in the literature anyway, the way that patriarchy is considered. And I did want to bring up the matriarchy conversation, because I think that oftentimes um, it's an either or, and it's like, both masculine and feminine traits and ideologies have their place. So
Balance is nice, and ideally we fit together and support one another, and it doesn't necessarily have to be either or because everything is needed.
exactly, exactly. I mean, that's the goal. However, we have to come to an understanding of ourselves and others. I mean, when you think about some of the systems that have been created, and rituals and routines that have been co-opted. So one of the main things that I'm thinking of in my head right now is
Mm-hmm.
religion. That's the thing that came to my mind. You know, when we talk about historically witch burning, for example, witch, we think of witch as, some gaggly woman in the forest concocting spells to turn everybody into frogs. When the truth of the matter is that witch, literally translated, means a wise woman. And these wise women were the ones who took care of pregnant women, who healed the
Yeah.
sick, who knew the, what the different plants in the forest and on the ground did, how to take care of your body. All of those things were how to use different elements in the earth to heal humanity of any of its ailments. We're also very intuitive, so knew how to determine what was going on with a person, so that they can assist in healing not just their physical, but their emotional, their mental, and their spiritual. And we're also keepers of traditions and stories, family stories. And yes, in a matriarchy, family was passed down, or the family name was passed down through the woman. So, her children would inherit her name, and any of her holdings, right? Because that was another huge piece of, patriarchy becoming huge, was the taking over of the lands that were owned by, and any of the holdings that were owned by women. And so, you have to look at it from different angles. It's not just an ideological thing. It is a thing of economics. It's a thing of spirituality. It's a thing of all of those considerations, how people's um, basic daily lives and minds were co-opted and shifted. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just sitting on this land and thinking about just spiritually how there were women here who kept a relationship with the land and kept things in balance in the sense of how villages grew and what lands were used for what. I'm sorry, that's an interjection from the local spirits who are not happy. So anyway, let's get back.
It's important, and that's something I think that is rising up a lot, because unfortunately, and if you're stuck in the toxic patriarchal mindset,
Mm-hmm.
then, because I have to make a distinction, because there are, men who are masculine who understand that there's a balance,
Yes.
How, unfortunately, though, we are being ruled by the toxic mindset, where unfortunately we are destroying our land, like literally destroying it, as if we have something else to go to, right? So, um, we have to be mindful of that. And I do feel like that is, the spirits are rising up around that, and calling for significant change. This is why you see a lot of people going back to, wanting to farm, live on the land, being conscientious about, using too many products and having all this stuff, all of
Yes.
those things are the ways in which we are, that's revolutionizing and creating a balance, right? Creating that balance.
Yes. Yes, that's a whole nother conversation, the connection between like patriarchy and capitalism and how we got where we are today,
Hmm.
just from being disconnected from the land. But I should move on because it's
No,
just, this
it's
is
the same
very juicy
conversation. It's the
conversation.
same conversation, because in your parenting now, what's the main thing in parenting for a lot
Thank
of
you.
parents? They want their children to be successful.
Yes.
And what is success? Success oftentimes is having a lot of money, having certain jobs, certain, these A, B, C, D, E, F, G's behind your name, and all of these
Mm-hmm.
other things. But we see that the main crisis, in my opinion, and from my observation, the main crisis that many of us are experiencing is one of mental and emotional and spiritual health, right? Because people are
Yes.
not able to cope, um, or understand even that life is so much simpler than what it is that we have contrived in this,
Yes.
matrix living. Um, and from the conversations that I've been seeing and hearing, I feel like a lot of people are realizing and recognizing that, and restoring themselves by getting rest and eating well, and, you know, um, re-educating themselves and their children, pulling away from the mindsets that have
Yes.
been keeping us in a chokehold, around who we are, who make us feel bad about who we are just naturally,
Yes.
in order to allow us to submit to a different way of seeing things. And I think the conversation is definitely the same. I mean, I'm in America right now, and looking at the way, companies are price gouging for everything.
Same here.
um,
Same here.
yeah, and it's really, um, I think it makes people look at, like, who reclaiming their power, basically, right? So
Yes. Yes. So kind of to go back, to rewind a little and flip the coin, as a mom, how do you know that you are raising and advancing the patriarchy? Like, can you elaborate more around like getting the A, B, C, D, E, F, G behind the child's names and other ways it looks to be raising the patriarchy?
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's you can see it as, in the naming of, I've seen couples where the woman took on or did not take on her husband's name, and she kept her name. Situations where the husband took her name, situations where both of them had both of their names, all of those situations where people changed
Right.
their names altogether because they wanted to disconnect from um, the colonial mindset and the enslaved um, past. And so there's different ways of doing things. I think that you enhance or advance the patriarchy when you don't feel like that's an option, to do things like that. If your child comes to you, or people say, because I saw a whole conversation about this recently, where it was like the man took the woman's name, and everybody's like, oh, he's this and that and this, and it's
Wow.
like, yeah, no, he's not any of those things. That's just a personal choice. Now, is that personal choice couched in empowerment or disempowerment? You can only know by having conversation with them or seeing what their point of view is. Because I can't say that just because I changed my name that I'm more advanced or intellectually
Yeah.
or woke or whatever, all these terminologies. I can't say that. But some of the ways that we continue to advance the patriarchy is even in just the way that we look at the human system, right? So we talked about, understanding women, understanding their bodies. So growing up, one of the things, women are constantly judged for what their bodies look like. Whether you can be too skinny, you can be too fat, you can be, it's just never ending. And you don't see that same kind of judgment when it comes to men,
Nope.
right? They can be fat and and I'm gonna show my personal bias right here, because unfortunately I always have said, I'm like, I don't even personally understand men being fat, because at the end of the day, testosterone, you all do like 3 push-ups and you're like skinny again.
Right. Back to normal.
Back to normal. We over here now, women, however, we will struggle
Look at the
all our
cake and it goes back
lives.
to the hips. Just look at it, not even smell it, not even licking the ice cream. I'm just looking at the chocolate cake and I have
That's
gained
it.
3 pounds.
That's it.
And
That's what
can't run
happened.
it off, can't work it off, nothing.
Nothing. Okay. So those kinds of things, and that's one of the things that I had to sort of protect and fight for my daughter with,
Mm,
because my daughter is she has a body like her mother, right? I was what people would consider mature in my physical stance when I was her age as well. And that was, it always felt very unsafe to have people constantly commenting on your body. I don't think people understand that when they think that they're making comments that are helpful, but really you're making someone feel, especially a young person, you're making them feel unsafe in their body. It's like, man, my body isn't good enough, it's not doing what it's supposed to. Oh, if I did what other people told me to do, then I would be better. It creates significant issues, and not just for women who are heavier, it's also for women who are skinny. And that's why I say it's a sham, it's a scam, because at the end of the day, it's just people exacting their own insecurities or their own limited view of humanity onto others. And so one of the things that we can absolutely do is to ensure that we teach our children to love their bodies, our girls to love their bodies, but also teach boys to
yes.
not comment on women's bodies in that way and to see them that way.
Right.
Because it's unacceptable, quite frankly. And the damage that you do to, in those few instances, is something that people spend their lifetime trying to bury themselves, dig themselves out of. I don't think people realize that. I'm 40 years old and I'm still, you know, still have insecurities come up around my body. Even after I've done something as great as deliver a child. It's like I should absolutely love my body, but that's not an easy thing to do when you, for the majority of your life, have heard that your body is insufficient or it could be better. That doesn't just go to your body, it goes to everything about you.
Your hair, your skin color, your eyes, what you're wearing, what you're doing. It's never, ever, 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 ever good enough.
Exactly. You're constantly looking at yourself, as a project to fix, as opposed to a, whole being with the ability to create and to build and to do and to love and to be loved and all of those things. So,
And I just think even raising children with that mindset of like the child is not lovable or right or okay as they are because they're
mhm,
not getting A's, because they're not, they're
mhm,
not the forward on the soccer team.
conforming.
They're on the bench. Like there's always
Yeah,
a I see how it's like just putting them in the box. It feels like
that
patriarchy is
competitive
very
nature.
boxy. Yes.
Yeah, that competitive, that's the patriarchy, that competitive ideology that's so deeply entrenched. I think that humans are naturally competitive, to be honest with you, but
Mhm.
it's not something where, like, those who are going to compete are going to just compete. People who don't are not pushed to compete. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, that's the difference there. But I think that everybody is pushed into the ideology of competing in a patriarchal system. It's like, I don't have the desire to compete with anybody
Right?
personally. I just don't.
This
Maybe
would
in
be a
Scrabble, but that's about it.
That's kind of fun competition though, because like it doesn't feel like everything is on the line. It's just like, am I going to spell this word correctly today? Am
Right.
I going to?
Right, exactly. It's a completely different thing. It's not for life and for resources. It's like everybody has the right to
Right.
resources, such as a decent home and water to drink, and you know what I'm saying. The other thing about patriarchy too, a piece of it is accountability.
Mm.
I think we get tricked a lot in this system when we are in a situations where I'm going to take it back to the environmental piece. We're in situations where we are doing things that are destructive to the environment, but we don't even realize it, right? And then we go through this whole process of learning what we have done to the environment. And it's sort of like, oh, well, you know, I didn't know. So, whatever, whatever type thing. Yeah. And I mean, we've all been there, but at the same time, I feel like the system itself creates a situation where people lose their ability to be accountable to their lives and what they're creating around them, right? Everybody can look at
Yes.
the politicians and say, oh, well, the politicians aren't giving us information, aren't telling us, and whatever, whatever. But it's like, no, the power is always in the people. And I think that patriarchy definitely clouds that for in a lot of ways, um, because it clouds it in a lot of ways, and it also creates smoke screens.
Yes.
And one of the smoke screens are things like for information, the way we get information, like through the news, smoke screen, religion, smoke screen,
Big smoke screen.
degrees, and thinking that, oh, I have this degree, and so therefore nothing. You still have plenty to learn. So, and what you have learned, you probably need to unlearn the majority of it because it was inaccurate, but or seen through the lens of some sociopath or racist person. So,
I'll never forget doing a master's in marketing, and like one of the first things I learned in class, I don't remember which class it was, and they were I think it was persuasion and influence, was like the whole
mm,
point of marketing is to make you feel bad about yourself. There's something wrong, you
yeah,
got to fix it. And at that point, I was in a master's course and the money was invested, but I knew I didn't want to do this because
right.
I couldn't find clever ways to make people need
Feel bad about
something, yes,
it. Yeah,
that they don't need.
right.
That hurt my heart. Like there were good things about that time in my life, but that I just remember sometimes just sitting in class and being like, "This is manipulation, and I want none of
Basically,
this."
and that is a hallmark of patriarchy, manipulation. That is a hallmark of patriarchy.
But it
Yeah.
also makes me wonder how did patriarchy. This is not on the question list, but I'm gonna ask it anyway because we vibing. So, how did patriarchy get to a space where it had to be manipulative, where it had to be kind of? It
Well,
feels
people
like, hmm,
resist. people resist, and so you have to use tactics, right? So I mean, everything about marketing is certain colors bring up certain emotions. So it's not um uh it's researched. It's based on
Yeah.
human nature. It just uses that human nature against against you. So you have to manipulate people, otherwise they're going to be like, I don't want that.
So
Because
we
we
so toxic masculinity, toxic patriarchy got to the place it did because the witches weren't falling for it. Nobody was falling for it. The peasants were
and through brute force
uprising.
and through brute force. I mean, that's a hallmark of patriarchy as well, using strength and control to get people to submit. All these wars. All these wars and all of these killings, and taking things by force. Yeah.
Yeah. That also makes me think of parenthood and how some of us have been raised that way. Some of us have been raised, we've had things taken from us that weren't given.
Mhm.
We've had like our freedom crushed as children. We've had our minds crushed as children. And like in some ways, not realizing that we're kind of putting our children in the same box.
Right.
It's kind
Not
of,
trusting the spirit of the person. I think that that's where we are. We're in this space. I know that's where I am, in this space where I have to trust the what my spirit is telling me, my soul is telling me is the best thing to do, and the best way to be. And that's what we really crush in a patriarchal system, so that people can conform and be, give their energy to a particular thing that serves, that end. Whereas, and that end is a destructive one. Oftentimes it's not one that is. I always say matriarchy to me and feminine principles are regenerative.
mm-hmm,
So if it's something that can persist without the destruction, without wide scale destruction, then to me that is a feminine thing, right?
mm-hmm,
So I mean, you can build things like that, that are systematic, that doesn't destroy. I mean, education, there's nothing wrong with education. It just doesn't have to be set up the way that it is, where people are taught in a way in absolutes, and taught inaccurate information, and taught in very finite ways of thinking.
yes, yes. And it's, I mean, even as a mother and listening to you describe patriarchy, and as we continue through this conversation, it makes me even reflect on the ways that I, as a mother, have been very
Hmm.
patriarchal, in the ways that I'm taught to be patriarchal, in the ways that I am almost supported and goading and putting children into little boxes rather than
Hmm.
kind of being more liberated with them. But even within a patriarchal system, if you misstep, it's like the freedom is gone for at least two generations and you're going to have to start back over. Like it's yeah, I can't discuss
It's a
that.
line to toe, because, on one hand, I always give this example of when, and I'm likewise, you're constantly unlearning,
Right.
constantly unlearning.
Right.
Because I always say your journey of wellness is not about what you're learning, but what you're unlearning.
Mhm.
Okay, because we got a lot of extra stuff going on in our mind.
Mhm.
So, one of the things that I always talk about, or the example that I give, is with my daughter, in the journey of having her love and appreciate herself and her body. She wants to wear, shorts that, when I was growing up, it was like, nah, you can't wear them shorts type thing. And I mean, they're not crazy short. They're like mid thigh or whatever. But even that back then that was like not, it was a no-no,
Mhm.
right? So, you know,
You better hit that knee.
right, exactly. And so, I at some point I would say to her, but I had to realize that it was my own upbringing and thought process that was creating that. It didn't have anything to do. It's like, it's hot. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Ain't got to do nothing. It's just hot outside. um, and but I did, in order to find some kind of balance, one of the things that I did say to her is to alert her to the realities that people are not going to be, everybody is not going to be kind about the way that you're expressing yourself.
Yes.
They're not. And so you have to be aware of that, you know, and decide how you're going to allow that to impact you, or if you're going to allow that to impact you.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a responsibility that comes with being free, right?
Right.
There's a responsibility that comes with that. There's always a responsibility. And your responsibility, in my view, is going to be, always to continue to liberate others through your thoughts and your actions and your words,
Mm-hmm.
as well as yourself. Because if you just get upset and cause a rift, then that's not really useful, right?
No.
So that's just something to be aware of. And I think that that's one of the ways that you create some level of balance to orient your child to the reality of what it is. If you decide that you don't want to be a doctor like your family has said, so you have to be very clear that you're going to have to find other systems of support to get you through whatever it is that you want to do instead. You know, you're going to have to be very clear that you're going to have to limit your time and interaction with people who don't want to see your vision or have any interest in your interests, or whatever the case may be. So it's not
Right.
just all peachy and roses, like, oh, I triumphed and I did this. There's the intermediate part of the emotional, dealing with that emotional backlash within yourself and with other people. And so that is a part of the process. So
Y- Yes. So, do you have any suggestions for wellness practices and tools that can help moms unlearn and kind of get out of the patriarchal box with themselves and their children?
I think journaling is a very powerful thing. And if you don't like to write, you can also record yourself. There's a ton of apps that you can, record yourself on, just talking through what you experience in a situation, right? So if you find that you are struggling with your child on a particular issue, um, be it something to do with the way they're dressing or the way they want to have their hair done or any of those things.
Big one.
I still get annoyed by the way my daughter wears some daggone Crocs everywhere, and it drives me nuts, girl. But I'm like, try another thing, some sneakers or something. I did finally get her to get a new pair of shoes this past weekend, though, so I'm very proud of myself. But anyway, some nice sandals, okay? So anyway, but journal and really go through your thought process. If you have a group that you can talk to, if you have, and be honest. Honesty is the best policy. Like, what did you really think, about that situation and what came up? And why did you think that way? Right? How did it make you feel?
Mm.
What specific emotions came up for you? There's
Mm.
I love to use it called the wheel of emotions, and it gives you words, right? Because sometimes you think that you're mad, you're angry, when you're really disappointed,
Yes.
right? So being very clear about what it is that you're experiencing. Of course, having someone like myself as a coach is helpful. Having someone who is a
Yes.
therapist is helpful, because we help you work through those mental constructs that really keep us all trapped. So I would say, creating a routine from that, just journaling every day, with your experiences, in parenting is powerful. If you have girlfriends that you feel like you can talk to, or guy friends, I mean, that you feel like you can talk to about, what you're experiencing, and you all talk about it. I think that's having a mixture of all of those is probably the best thing,
Yeah.
right? But everybody has to start somewhere. But just creating a routine where you really reflect on your parenting and really think about, what your parenting mission is. What is your mission as a parent?
Right.
Right? We don't think about that, right? Consider what it is. You may not know it now, but it can formulate and develop as you go along and you really reflect on your parenting experiences. So that's one of the wellness tools. And that may not seem like it's a wellness tool, but it is, because it helps you to release some emotional energy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not easy, right? Because you'll have to constantly you'll have to find a different way of interacting that you have never interacted before. And so you're literally creating something new with your family, with yourself, and with your children that is different. And it's going to take some trial and error, because kids try you. I don't care what where you I don't care what you trying to do, you gentle parenting or whatever. They gonna try you, because
Their job.
that's just what it is. Sometimes they're trying you. Sometimes they're naturally, inquisitive. But sometimes they know exactly. They're trying to see how you respond to certain things. Okay. And that is absolutely a reality. I have been around many a children, and that is just what that is just what it is. But that grows your wisdom as an adult and interacting with them, when you can respond to them in ways that are balanced. But you have to find that balance in you. You can't react based on your
Right.
own trigger, you know,
Which
and it's a process.
comes to the intergenerational healing part that you do, in the sense of
Mm,
not passing down the same trauma, not passing down the same issues and concerns, and instilling it in your children by constantly reacting from the same triggers that, our parents had with us. It also ties
exactly.
into the whole like accountability part you were talking about, as accountability as the thing to undo the patriarchy. If you're being accountable with yourself, if you're able to hold yourself responsible, I feel like children smell that. If you're willing to be responsible with your word and with yourself, and kind of call
Hmm.
yourself on the carpet, it opens up a whole new relationship, because all of a sudden you're learning life with them, gives them space to make mistakes.
Exactly. It's a conversation. It is not
Mm-hmm.
a knock down, drag out
We'll submit
fight.
to my will and wash your butt
Right.
now.
It's a conversation. And so it's like, are you willing to have a conversation with your children? Are you willing to let go of this thought that, oh, I'm the adult, and so therefore I'm the all knowing wise person, and realize that you are not, and be okay with that?
And it's okay.
Because your children are growing up at a different time. So similar issues, but they're processing it and seeing it differently than you perhaps were, or that you remember. Right. And so you have
Ooh.
to be open to that. And yeah. And of course, yes, you do still have some wisdom, because there are plenty of things that I can see, like some of my daughter's friends, and I'm like, no, that one is
Mm.
uh,
Woo.
or and you don't have to, you have to find ways to talk to them that make them feel like they're invested in the outcome and the decision, and they've made the decision. You know what I'm saying? And there's many ways that you can do that. It could just be matter of fact, like, ugh, I was watching this show and I saw these two people who were supposed to be friends, and one of the girls was like low key saying something to like, you got to make
Mm-hmm.
up the scenario. You got to become a storyteller and a conjurer in these streets, okay?
Gonna
And that's
keep them
difficult
kids
for me
safe,
because
yeah.
I'm very direct. Yeah, that's difficult for me because I have a very direct personality, but I have to learn, that my daughter works differently, and that's a huge thing, because oftentimes our children can be the opposite of how we work, and so we have to
Ooh.
become very flexible in the way that we um, do things, and we can't just be like, "Oh, this is the way I do things," because your children remember it differently than what you do.
Yes. And I mean, ideally, divine feminine flows anyway. So
Exactly.
we have it in us to
Exactly.
do.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
Hmm.
I feel like we already touched on this with the wellness tools and the learning, but do you have any other suggestions for how mothers can unlearn ways in which, we support the oppression of the patriarchy in ourselves and each other?
There are so many great resources and tools out there. So many great books about conscious parenting and all of those things. And I'm not saying that all of everything in them are correct, by the way, or
That's
will
fair.
work for you.
That's
You
fair.
have to work, you have to find what works for you and just be open mentally to things being different, honestly. If you want to really raise a liberated individual, you have to honor their thought processes, honor their desires, understand their soul. I'm a huge fan of getting an astrological read up of your child. That's different. But I did, and that definitely helped me to understand my daughter better and understand how we function better together. I
Ooh,
actually
yes.
birthed my what would could be considered my best friend, so that's it's different, a little different. Yeah, like we're literally like compatible. Compatible, even though on the outside we're different, because she's very artsy, I'm very like logical. you know but there's a balance for us to strike together. But I would highly recommend getting astrological reading, and I can provide you with resources of people that I know who do that, and you can share that below.
Yes.
But
Please do.
mhm, yeah, so that's another tool as well. There's plenty of things out there to read, and I don't even want to give specific suggestions, but just put it in your mind that you want to find something that will work best for you, and go ahead and something will come up that it will be perfect for you. Okay.
Okay.
um I in terms of working on yourself as parents, you always have to be working on yourself, right? And know that force is not, because a huge conversation that is often had
Mm,
is around spanking,
mm.
and beatings, because we always, I got my behind whipped when I was a kid and I'm okay. Are you, Johnny? Are you, Catherine? No, I don't think you
No.
are.
Nobody's okay with
um,
it. Nobody's okay with
right,
it. You could tell
because when
that
you
lie
think about
now, but you weren't
right,
okay at
because
the
when you think about
time.
what a lot of people got spankings for, it was like just being inquisitive as a kid. So now
Wrong
you're
place, wrong time. When daddy had a bad day, mommy stressed out.
yeah,
Let's not act like everybody
right.
was beating everybody from a space of love and centeredness. It was not happening.
Exactly. Exactly. And I would venture to say, if there is love and centeredness, then you would find a different way.
Right?
Right. I would venture to say that, because I know I've probably slapped up my daughter twice in her whole life, and each time I'm very clear that I was not happy. I was angry and reactive. You know,
Right.
but it was always in my consciousness that that was not something that I desired to do as a parent. Like, I just found it to be, first of all, it takes mad energy out of you as a parent. It's
Right.
like, nah, that's a lot. But also it's like, what is the aim? What is the end? What end are you achieving here? Seriously.
Right. Because it breaks trust and the kid doesn't look at you the same way anymore.
Hmm. Yeah. Yep. Or they feel like, if they do something wrong, there's some punishment that should come, or if they make a mistake, there's some punishment that must come from it. You know? And it's like, no, if you're going along your normal life and just trying things and making mistake, that's one thing. Now, if you're doing some crap that's intentional, you know better, then that's another conversation, right?
Yes. Yes.
So that can be a different conversation, but it really just depends on various scenarios. So I think that that is a conversation to be aware of and to have with your significant other, in your family, you know, in those situations.
Which goes into the next question. How do we navigate this work when we might find our partners, our families, our friends are not supportive? And society is already a given. Like that's real, but how do you navigate dismantling the patriarchy as a mother?
It's hard. Honestly, it can take up a lot. You have to be very resolute in what it is that that your parenting philosophy and what you want. If you know that, speaking a certain way to your to children I've had to protect my child from being spoken to in certain ways, and her defending herself and me being like, well, she wasn't incorrect. You
Right.
shouldn't have said that to her. Just because she's a child, that doesn't mean that you have the right to say whatever you feel like you want to say.
Okay, wait. I'm gonna do this real quick because I've wanted to do this.
I like that feature. That's a cute feature.
But like, I think there's something about like not talking out your neck to children. Cause
Yeah, I
my
mean,
youngest will give
Bell,
it to you, and I'm like, well, he's 5, but he's got a point.
right? Bell Hooks talks about how children are the most underprotected class of people
Yes.
ever, and it's true when you think about it. It's kind of like we just do things to kids because they can adapt, right? And it's like, no,
Right.
I had, and I know I can, like, my daughter doesn't like going anywhere. I'm going places and I'm like, all right, come on, let's go. And she's like, no, I want to stay in the house. And I have to just accept it. She likes to wear her hair a certain way with mad colors in it. Whatever. Like, there's certain things that you just gotta. Children are they know what they're learning, and there are a lot of things that they know about themselves
Right.
that you can't tell them that they. You know what I'm saying? Like, they
Right.
know that they don't like XYZ. Yeah, maybe it's hard to see them eating chicken nuggets every day because they tried chicken nuggets and that's the only thing that they resonated with. Continue to try different things with them. I remember I was working with a child, and this is a little bit different because he was autistic, but every day I would make, have a little something different from what he was used to eating, and I would put it on his plate. Eventually he started to eat it. He was like, oh, this ain't bad.
But that's because you respected his right to choose and his autonomy as a human being. And I feel like patriarchy does that to us as adults, and then we pass that mantle down sometimes onto children and don't even realize
Yeah,
that we're doing it.
right. In work, I've always been the
Yes.
type of person who I was like, I am not doing long commutes to no job ever. Right? Even when that was the norm, right? Everybody, oh, I commute 2 hours. Ooh, that sounds tiring, girl. Right? And I'll be like, I refuse. If it ain't 30 minutes away, tops, I ain't going. And now everybody has gotten the taste because they work from home. And I'm like, well, I've been doing that for a while. So, welcome to this side because it's always been enjoyable. But
So this is off script. Like even the idea of COVID, I feel like in some way COVID has helped bust up some stuff and break up some sort of masculine oppressive structures and
mhm.
continues to because it's like this rogue element that in some ways like the divine feminine courses you to stand in yourself even if you don't want to.
Mhm.
And
Yeah. I mean, you didn't have any choice.
you
What
don't.
were you gonna do? A lot of people were simply afraid. you know, um, Companies had to shift and make adjustments.
Companies,
People had to stay home.
governments,
Governments.
farming.
You know, and some people will say that this is the backlash. Like, now, all these high prices is the backlash of that, but I don't think so. I think that it's the way for us to continue to find ways to make our society more equitable, right? And to see how these systems are really working so that we can find better ways to work around them or dismantle them or, you know what I'm saying? Build them differently or whatever,
Whatever's going to
depending on,
happen.
right, whatever's actually going to be best for the majority of people or all people, right? So,
Right.
if that's possible, is it possible? You know, what is everybody doesn't want to be rich. Everybody doesn't want to be, but everybody definitely wants decent housing, decent water,
Food.
clothing, and to feel like food, and to feel like they have their autonomy. That's for sure. I don't say many things are for sure, but that, to me, that's for sure.
For sure.
Because even a homeless person is, they got their side of the street. You feel me? So, you know, yeah. So that's I don't even know if I answered the question, but that's part of
Now that was off. That was it. Just made me think of COVID. I
mm,
I feel very blessed, and again, this is off the question sheet. I feel very blessed to be in France and be an immigrant because I get to talk to other immigrants who have a completely different worldview of than the French and then like even Americans. And I have this lovely neighbor, and we constantly talk about how what the world needs is more collaboration, and how where she's from, if a neighbor needs to go get treatment for like, whatever, for medical procedure and they don't offer it in the country, neighborhood will pitch in so you can go get your treatment and come back. They will like watch the kids. Everybody's got five on it because we all love you. We want you well. She was talking about
yeah.
her father's mango tree and everybody eating the mangoes and she's eating the mangoes. And I'm like,
Yes, I love that.
this is it. Like this is how we're gonna get through. And I just kind of wonder, part of me is like, how do we get to this place? But I'm like, we have to be forced there because I'm not quite sure everybody wants that or even feels like that's real. But when I talk to other people, I'm like, this is real. Because it's because we talk about French society. We talk about the things we see, and it's always kind of like, I don't know what's gonna happen here, but this all seems like a bad idea. Nobody talks to anybody, nobody's helping anybody, nobody's
That's a hallmark of patriarchy as well. Is scarcity mindset. Because people don't do stuff like that because they have a scarcity and distrustful mindset about everything and everyone, right? I think that the system breeds that. When you're constantly hearing about shortage here and this and that, and this person stabbed this person in the back, and when that information is constantly in your consciousness, then you feel like you have to hoard things. I mean, look at the
right,
systems; they hoard all the time. They take from other places and hoard. you know,
right.
it's one of the mindsets that is critical to dismantle within yourself, because I feel like all of us take that on, especially if you grow up in poverty, or you know what I'm saying, all of those things just become entrenched in you, and you really have to become clear and aware of it. And these are also all ways that you reclaim your wellness, by the way, right? So these are not separate. So some of the things that I'm talking about when you're talking about reclaiming your wellness, that this kind of mindset dismantling is a part of it. Um, and so as I was saying earlier, in matriarchal societies, people sharing,
Right.
everybody being well was a hallmark of those societies, right? Nobody would be starving. People are taken care of because, I mean, if you have a farm full of, I mean, in this country we throw away a lot of food, and it's
Here too.
literally illegal to, like, for restaurants to, for example, give leftover food to people. Why? You know, and then all this food shortage and all the, it's a hallmark of patriarchal thinking, because it's couched in capitalism, and if I can't make profit from it, then people will take advantage of me, or take advantage of it. And we see it all the time. We
Mm,
probably have experienced it. We probably proliferated in some way, because I say all the time, I don't do nothing for free. But that's not how I run everything in my life, because I
right.
definitely give away for sure. I definitely share with people for sure when I feel like it's to be shared. It's a tricky thing because
Right.
some people are seeking to take advantage, but you have to, your level of clarity has to be there to know.
Right, which goes back to something you were saying earlier about parenting from a soul space and recognizing who you are and what your intentions are, and as a parent and as a mother, and kind of moving and negotiating with your child from that space, kind of just expanding
Mhm.
it just to everything,
Right.
and practicing discernment around what you're giving, what you're receiving, what you're engaging in.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm,
I mean, another way to practice better or more patriarchy, less parenting, is to not watch television, because a lot of things are reinforced in television, in music. I literally cannot listen to certain music at this point in my life. Like, it gives me anxiety to even listen. I'm like, oh my God, this is so freaking
Right.
difficult. Or watching certain television shows that reinforce certain behaviors or mind, thought processes around people and things. I can't watch it. Can't watch it. So, mhm.
No. Okay, so one more question that kind of ties in, and then I'm like let you go. How have you supported and protected your daughter's freedom as she continues to grow up?
Just allowing her to be herself and allowing her to be who she is, providing guidance and her observing how I do things, right? So how I function with my friends, how I, support things with my finances, how I do things, being an example, but also just allowing her to be. When I
Right.
think about my childhood, I wasn't allowed to just be. I've been working since I was like 12, babysitting and all of that. And, there was always this pressure to do,
Right.
right? No support and just being. And I think, I hope that I'm giving her that structure of being and developing her understanding of her soul's purpose and needs and desires so that she can be, the best person that she can be, with her own thought process and mindset. But I also am very clear, you have to also protect your children spiritually by praying over them and for them. Um, you also have to protect them mentally,
Yeah.
by ensuring that certain things do not enter into their space. Because people will try to say, "Oh, your child is this and that," and it's like, no, I don't play with the words that people use, like, over your children, like, "Oh, they're bad," or "They're this or that." I'm like, no, they're not. They're just figuring it out. So, those are ways to protect your children for sure. And again, it always comes back to you have to protect yourself in that way too. All right, it's easier for you to protect them when you can protect yourself in that way, or it's confusing to them if you're not protecting yourself in that way. If your child sees you, for example, in an abusive relationship, but you're, trying to teach them about relationships, what do you think is going to land? You know, most times, what's going to land more is what they see. That's why I said the example is
Right.
important. Um, so yeah, those are different ways. But also I do Reiki. So if you're interested in getting Reiki done for yourself, for your child, um, then you can certainly visit my link tree and sign up there, or to get a consultation or coaching. You can do that as well.
Yeah. So, Cecile, thank you so much for being here and sharing
Thank
your wisdom.
you.
Thank you
Welcome.
for all watching and listening whenever you get here, wherever you are. And I look forward to
Mhm.
seeing all of y'all next Tuesday for our next conversation around drumroll, finding the bravery and create a life that works for you and your family,
Mhm.
which
Sorry.
kind of like, comes into this as well. It fits nicely.
It does. It really does, because I'm to say the last thing. A huge thing that patriarchy suppresses in a lot of us is our spirituality and our ability to envision.
Hmm.
Okay, our vision is the most powerful thing that we have. But imagine we're constantly watching television. We have visions in our mind based on the fears of other people, or the inadequacies of other people. So our vision has been significantly co-opted. So we can't even conceive and imagine a different life, and what is actually for us, because I believe that what comes up in our vision is what is actually for us. So somebody asked me one time, well, why do you want to be rich? And I was like, you know what? It wasn't something that I just woke up and said. I woke up and said because I saw somebody else do it. It's just been something that I've always sensed in my spirit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't, if that wasn't
Yes.
my walk in life, then I don't believe that that's what I want. I would be content with just being, you know, doing whatever. And that's cool too, if that's what it is that is your walk. So, I think that that's part of the conversation that we'll certainly have. You have to, because I can say that everything that I've envisioned, if it was for me, it stayed. If it was not, then it did not. And, and oftentimes I may have envisioned things that were not for me because of my conceptualization based on the society that we're in. Right. So,
Right. And the need to protect your vision and also discern sometimes you can't share it with other people because it's not for them
yeah,
and they can't
you have to be
support you
discerning.
on it.
Yeah. You have to be discerning with that for sure, because um, it just doesn't, it really doesn't serve you to really tell people who are just going to always have something negative to say. Like I had to realize that I had, and I'm very careful to not even be around people who I don't feel like I can talk about my vision with. Because what's the
Right.
point? Like, if you're afraid of somebody's vision, then you're not the type of person that I need to be around.
If you're
Period. Like,
offended, hurt, and you want to get aggressive because I said I want to grow tomatoes, there's a problem. We ain't supposed to be
it just
together.
doesn't.
I'm going to
I
leave you
don't,
alone.
and that shows you that they themselves don't really have a vision that is for themselves, right? Because oftentimes the
Right.
quote unquote subversive visions that people have issues with. It's not, if you said something that's commonplace that they were interested in, they ain't gonna find nothing wrong with it. So, anyway,
We're going to chop it up next week.
we'll we'll get into it. We're gonna get into it.
All right. Well, y'all stay blessed. I look forward to seeing you next week.
All
All
right,
right.
peace, y'all.
Peace.
Thank you.
Okay. We still here. Are we live? No, in broadcast.